Hello and welcome to the Small Business Agenda. My name is Matthew Gordon and I'm the co-founder of OurSay.org, and we are at the NAB Small Business Summit in partnership with the Council of Small Businesses Australia. Over the last 3 weeks, we've been asking our 65,000 members to define the most important questions they have about small business. Today we'll be joining the Minister and the Shadow Minister for Small Business and find out what answers they have for your questions. Question 1, which is our third most voted for question, comes from Dino Goodbrew and received 56 votes over the last 3 weeks. And Dean is a passionate eco-entrepreneur, a CEO and an ideas man for Good Brew, which is a sustainable beer business operating since 2007. His business focuses on the triple bottom line. He calls it a win for the consumer, a win for the producer and a win for the planet. Dino's question is, due to our global climate emergency, which is currently being exacerbated by big business, as usual, and to prevent looming food security issues, amongst other things, is a transparent, easily accessible system of grants for small businesses committed to sustainable practice not a great idea?
Well, Dino, there are lots of really good ideas. There are lots of great ideas. But government always has to prioritise what it can fund and what it can't fund. So, although the idea that you put is in its form a great idea, the government does have programs to fund and to support energy efficient initiatives. You know, just the other day I was at Pakenham talking with apple and pear producers about energy efficiency programs that are available to help reduce energy costs. Reduce input costs for small businesses, you improve the profitability of small businesses. And therefore that program, run by the Climate Change Department, is a very, very important program. We also have other measures, and I'd advise business operators around the country to go to the Small Business Advisory Service and ask questions about the sorts of funding that is available to help companies be both innovative in a technological sense, but also energy efficient in the sense of managing the cost base. So as Australia continues to grow and to meet the food, the fibre, the protein needs of our region, we know that we will need to have a more productive agriculture sector. We know that that will provide our farming businesses, which are small businesses, with terrific opportunities. But they'll be opportunities that really will fire up when those businesses embrace the principles of sustainability, the opportunity represented by the marketplace, and also do it in a way that is energy efficient.
A follow-up question to that is, if there are grants out there and assistance available for people like Dino who run a small business and a unique business as well, a brewery that's powered by solar panels and has all sorts of organic ingredients, and he rides around on a bike with his kegs and to various parties to sell his beer. Why are they sometimes these assistance packages so difficult to apply for and to get in touch with and hear about from the small business community and the community that Dino is a part of?
I think in many ways the kinds of assistance that can be available from multiple government sources and from multiple tiers of government, sometimes from state government, sometimes from the federal government, sometimes, such as the energy efficiency measure that I mentioned earlier for the pear and apple orchard that I was at, it's available out of the clean energy area. And so as a consequence, it's not always aligned as a particular small business would want it to be aligned, because they're designed to perform different functions and therefore sit in different portfolios. That's part of the complexity of government. Now, why not make that easier? Largely because systems need to be robust and transparent in and of their own right, and that does create a degree of complexity. And that's one of the reasons why we provide our Small Business Advisory Service, which, as we meet today, has handled inquiries from over 210,000 small businesses. That's around 10% of all of Australia's small businesses. So I'd strongly advise Dino to be talking with that advisory service, to get onto the business.gov.au website and to have a look at what is available.
That's a great answer, and I think it's important to point out those services or make sure that message gets across. The second question, our second most voted for question, comes from Will Dable and received 60 votes. And Will is the director of SquareWeave, a web innovation startup with clients including the big banks, government and a large range of profitable startup enterprises. And he's concerned about his talent leaving for the Valley before he can hire them. His question is, the Aussie startup scene wants faster internet, greater access to capital and a safety net for riskier ventures. Currently, most of these things are not up to scratch in Australia, and talented folks are leaving this country to move to the US and work in the Valley. How do you plan to fix this?
There are several steps along this chain. The first one is, of course, the NBN. The NBN doesn't just go past every household. It goes past the front door of every business, big, medium and small. All more than 2 million small businesses will have free access to the NBN. That will create, at the speed of light, the connection which will mean that small businesses can avail themselves of the computing power of the cloud. Cloud computing provides massive data management capability and also up-to-date boutique applications for specific, maybe accounting purposes. So I see the cloud, I see the NBN as being a substantial enabler that would allow a business to talk to a counterpart in Davis in California, in Boston or in Birmingham, as if they're having an instant time conversation. That's a terrific enabler, but it can't just stop there, because the NBN and the optical fibre connectivity of all of our businesses will drive innovation at a software and at an application level. And that innovation in and of itself will be the crucible for new businesses, big and small. Now, the question about the availability of effectively low-cost capital for risky startup ventures. This is always problematic. Not so long ago, I was executive director of a medical research foundation. We had a particular technology in that medical research foundation which injected at blastocyst phase a cell with effectively a predisposition for particular genetic diseases. It converted effectively a white mouse animal model into a specimen for scientific investigation and discovery, to discover cures to diseases such as Alzheimer's. That investment in the science and technology took the white mouse from being worth 50 cents effectively as python food and converted that mouse to a $50,000 piece of a research medical jigsaw puzzle to find cures to significant disease. We searched the world for the right capital funding, the venture capital funding to build that business. It's called OzGene. You can Google it up, OzGene. OzGene's now functioning and operating in Perth. I think you need a couple of elements to allow such startups to be successful. Passion, you need some good luck. And you also need to be able to find your way through the venture funding environment. I don't think that it's a reasonable proposition that government should provide that risk startup capital. But what government does provide are programs that assist companies. So, for instance, the Export Market Development Grant. It allowed us at OzGene to get just $2,000 when we needed it, which allowed our principal scientist to go to Bio 2000 in Boston and to sell the product. Sell the product, build a market, create a revenue stream, have a revenue stream, invest in the technology. It's a virtuous cycle that it can be very difficult to break into.
And what can governments do to further create the safety net for entrepreneurs to take risks and invest their time and perhaps their own capital or the capital of other startups?
I think we have to accept that the business of risk taking is just that. You can't de-risk risk taking. It's at the very heart of entrepreneurial activity. If we de-risk all risk, then we won't have a competitive environment. Now, I fully accept, and that's why I made mention of export market development grants, programs that are run by the innovation department and by the trade department in order to assist entrepreneurs to find bigger and better opportunities for their ideas, their goods and their services.
And the final one, with the most voted for question, is from John Yo and received 66 votes. And John Yo is a small business coach. John's question: are there plans to find, promote and accelerate small, savvy, world-class ideas that will move us beyond a resource-based economy to a digital ideas economy, especially in research and commercialisation? We need to end the brain drain and smart ideas being bought and taken overseas. I'm also not talking about delegations and tech hubs, which are helpful but narrow in scope.
John, as a small business coach, I think this sort of question grows from your personal view of the world and then the experience that you've had in talking to fired up, enthusiastic entrepreneurs in their small business environment. You know, I began not so long ago working in the resources sector in oil and gas. And John, what I found was the intersection between modern digital technology and an old resource sector company, an oil and gas company, was the place where real value add took place. So I don't think it's a matter of looking always towards the digital and the technological for the innovation. Sometimes the real wealth creation can be had at the intersection of an old technology enhanced and improved by new technology. An example of that I saw in the southwest of Western Australia not so long ago in a saw logging mill. The saw logging is a pretty traditional and old-fashioned sort of business. But you know, John, the business of having the IT scan a log, optimise the cuts to minimise wastage and optimise revenue from the product meant that that timber mill had more onboard computing technology and skill than Apollo 11 did when it went to the moon. And I was in a timber mill. So the point that you make about innovation in technology and in ideas, it's all around us. And I think it grows from us as an innovative nation. Just earlier this week, I was at a uranium mine in northern South Australia, at Beverley. This is a uranium mine that recovers the uranium in solution from its subsurface location. It recovers the highly valuable uranium ore without a need to mine. It does it in a closed system. It does it in one of the most stringent environmentally managed environments that there is. So I think we can apply our technology, our ideas and our innovation to wealth creation to make our place a better place to live, to make our jobs better and more sustainable jobs, and to have the real impact on this world that Australians have traditionally had. A bit of a larrikin spirit, a bit of an adventurous spirit, but a willingness to make things work. That's what really drives, I think, the idea of an Australian business. And I think around the world and over time, it's what's driven our success.
I wanted just to follow up on the vision about how we can go beyond the resources economy. John's in particular very interested in this. There is a time when the resources won't be our economy, and we need a plan for, well, what will we be doing beyond that. We are currently sort of not setting ourselves up to keep the ideas in Australia. So what's the plan around?
So John, I think the idea in that is we need to think carefully about what our resource economy is. You know, the place that is the heart of my electorate in Western Australia, Rockingham, it started its life 150 years ago as a jarrah export facility. It exported jarrah logs to northern England, where they were cut into small pieces that were used effectively as cobblestones. The resource did run out. The use of jarrah as road paving is pretty wasteful. But you know, the modern resource economy can take a depleted resource or a weak resource, such as magnetite iron ore, enrich it, and something in the case of magnetite, which has an iron value of less than 30%, can, through sophisticated minerals processing, be made more valuable than a piece of Brockman iron ore of 68% Fe content. That's done through application of technology. So I do see technology as a way for us to optimise our resource base, but technology is also a way for us to grow our service economy, our education economy, our banking economy, our insurance economy, our healthcare economy. These service economies are economies, I think of them more as their own ecosystems. They work in a way that most of our world doesn't understand. Something like Medicare is globally a revolutionary piece of public administration and healthcare management. The ideas that underpin it and the technology that underpins it allows us to be world leaders in keeping health costs down, but healthcare high. So I do see a world that's hungry for our technology ideas and opportunities in a service economy of the future for us to grow our business opportunities. And I'm looking forward to meeting the entrepreneurs who are doing that.
Terrific. Just one quick follow-up question around that. What's your stance around the emerging trends of the social entrepreneurship and the social enterprise movement, where businesses are designed to deliver more than profits but create social value for their community?
I think that any business, when it's operating efficiently, is contributing to our society. But we don't get the optimal contribution from most market-based businesses until they are extremely profitable. Those businesses that enter into the social entrepreneurship, and the first time I met a social entrepreneur, he was the former coach of the Fremantle Dockers. Gerard Neesham had built a business that in effect trained young adult Aboriginal men and women through sport to better prepare them for work. And then through that preparation for work, then began to source jobs. It becomes part of the social entrepreneurial environment that's helped us bring Indigenous employment into the mainstream. Off the back of a robust, globally competitive resources economy, we see the growth through social entrepreneurship of those mechanisms that genuinely lift people up and give them hope and give them jobs. So I do see social entrepreneurship as being very important.
Well, thanks very much again for your time, Minister. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Dino's question is this. Due to our global climate emergency, which is currently being exacerbated by big business, as usual, and to prevent looming food security issues, amongst other things, is a transparent and easily accessible system of grants for small businesses committed to sustainable practices not a great idea?
Well, what we've argued is that there needs to be action taken to reduce our emissions. But as you know, we don't think a carbon tax is either achieving that goal, nor is it giving the right incentives for people to change their practice. It hits everybody, and it puts upward cost pressures on businesses like Dino's and doesn't do anything to help the environment. We think a better way to go is to partner with businesses, perhaps like Dino's, to see who is best placed to achieve verifiable emissions reductions and to partner with them. The grant process would be about asking the Australian public and the economy and businesses, what are your emissions reduction opportunities? Bring them to us. What is the price at which the government can purchase those outcomes and in effect help part finance the improved technology that Dino's talking about? There's plenty of scope for that. The Australian economy is about half the size of the Californian economy, and we have about half the population, yet we use about the same amount of energy. So particularly around energy efficiency, we think there are some opportunities, and as you've heard us talk about before, we think better soils and carbon sequestration there, trees, that part of the technology, another part of that piece, but that direct action will provide an opportunity for businesses to bid for verifiable emissions reduction projects, and it sounds like Dino's already wired up and ready to go for that kind of measure.
Dean brews his beer with solar panels and buys organic local inputs and rides his bike around with a couple of kegs on it to various parties around town. Quite a character.
Yeah.
And he's always found it very difficult to engage with government agencies and to get the sort of assistance that he requires. If there are grants out there, he wants to know why they're so difficult to apply for or so hard to be in touch with.
I mean, you need a organisational feng shui doctorship to find your way around Commonwealth departments, state agencies, and in some cases the application processes are so demanding. In fact, some of them have such compliance burdens attached to them. Many people just walk away and say it's too hard. One of the things we've been aiming to do is reduce that red tape burden, but also have a single entry point into government that acts like a concierge for people like Dino. We've called it an ombudsman, but we're working on the title because that might not communicate what we're aiming to achieve, because what we're aiming to achieve is Dino can know there's one place he can go, where there's a team of people who understand him, his business, and have the knowledge of where to find help that he's looking for within government. And if they can't provide the information directly that Dino needs, they can be the concierge to take him to where it is. And then through that experience, that same agency can influence the way governments shape their grant programs, the grant criteria, and communicate them to small business, because we think too much of that stuff's geared up for big business. And it's just overwhelming for the little guys and gals out there that are really driving innovation and entrepreneurship.
I'll make sure that message gets back to you.
Yeah.
Question 2, our second most voted for question, comes from Will Dable and received 60 votes. And Will is the director of SquareWeave, a web innovation startup with clients including the big banks, government, and a large range of profitable startup enterprises. And he's concerned about his talent leaving for the Valley before he can hire them.
Where's he now? Where's he living now?
He's in Melbourne.
Oh, look, tell him the weather's better in Melbourne than Palo Alto. That's probably not right, but anyway, we could pitch that to him.
So his question is, the Aussie startup scene wants faster internet, greater access to capital, and a safety net for riskier ventures.
Yeah.
Currently, most of these are not up to scratch in Australia, and talented folks are leaving this country to move to the US and work in the Valley. How do you plan to fix this?
Okay, a couple of things. We understand that high-speed broadband is a great enabler. Our plan actually sees high speeds rolled out much faster than under the Labor strategy and much more cost effectively. I'm sure people would like to save around $300 a year on their broadband costs, because cost is important for small business. But in my community, as an example, we're not scheduled to get Labor's broadband rollout till 2021, 2022. Now, our questioner will be a middle-aged guy like me by then and have missed that opportunity. Whereas our plan says, well, let's get it rolled out within the first 3 years, have around 50 meg, minimum of 25, have fibre into the commercial areas and industrial areas like Frankston CBD, like where our industrial parks are, but get it in now, get it in sooner, get it in more cost effectively, and that will help provide that enabler that's being looked for. On the issue of translating a good idea into a business, the Howard government used to have a program called Comet. It was an evolution from commercialisation, commercial ready. So there was an idea that had the concept proven but needed some help to turn that into a business. Now, for some reason, Labor scrapped that, wondered what it was going to do for 18 months, created Commercialisation Australia, had more staff than grants that it was issuing. It's finding its way a bit now, but we think a lot of that can be streamlined so that smaller entrepreneurs can gain better access to those current avenues of support. My last point, though, is in that tech space, their access to startup capital and venture support, it's one of the challenges, but there are a number of financiers specialising in that space. But think of the poor old guy that wants to start up a motor mechanic business. The entry costs for that type of new business are so much higher than a technology-based business. So we actually think the technology-based businesses can get a presence and bulk up in the marketplace in a far more cost-effective way than some of these more traditional forms of businesses, equally important but have much larger barriers to entry. So, there's some opportunities there, and he sounds like the kind of entrepreneur with the enterprising spirit we need more of in this country.
Indeed. He's also looking at how do we create the right environment for that entrepreneurial spirit in terms of risk-taking and whether a safety net for risk-taking can be implemented under a government.
Well, we actually think there's a need for a renaissance in enterprise to actually say this risk-taking matters and it should be encouraged. You won't get to a point where the taxpayer underwrites it, though. I mean, you go to a neighbourhood and say, look, here's a really bright person with a great idea. How would you like some of your taxes backing that? I mean, that's probably a bridge too far. What we're keen to see is that there's support available so people can take their ideas, get them to those that are in the business of providing finance, of evaluating risks, of steering a bright-eyed, fire-in-the-belly entrepreneur into how to turn that great business idea into a business that works. Now, that's also about finding venture partners, because the banks like to see a proven track record before they'll lend. It's like a change in the new normal in banks. So it often means going to other areas of the economy where other financiers might be involved, and also our view that we need more competition in the banking sector because it's really consolidated around the big four. So some of those second tier and non-bank lenders that used to be very attractive for smaller entrepreneurs, their market shares shrunk dramatically, and that's why we think we need to re-energise competition as well, so he's got options and people compete for his interest and his business to support his idea.
Cool, great, thank you. And the final question, question 3, our most voted for question is from John Yeo, and received 66 votes. John is a small business coach. And his question is, are there plans to find, promote and accelerate the startup savvy world-class ideas that will move us beyond a resource-based economy to a digital ideas economy, especially research and commercialisation? We need to end the brain drain and smart ideas being bought and taken overseas. I'm also not talking about delegations and tech hubs, which are helpful but narrow in scope.
Well, from people with an idea, a business proposition that they're feeling others aren't ready to embrace with the passion they are. And I hear stories of people moving to other economies where they feel there's more support for that. We in Australia had a bipartisan R&D tax concession arrangement which was very well supported, but then got changed by Labor to be far less attractive for smaller businesses. They introduced concepts like novelty, and people are going, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an inventor, I'm a creator of wealth. I don't even know what they're talking about. And it got to the point where it became so frustrating for many smaller businesses, they've turned their back on that avenue and are now looking elsewhere for that kind of support. It's part of what we talked about earlier, a renaissance of enterprise, where entrepreneurship is seen as a real driver for the over-the-horizon economy. This is the economy the other side of the mining boom. Mining's important, but when we look to the future, we need to look at these other more diverse business opportunities to get young people wanting to be their own employer, to say, I'm not looking for a job, I want to create jobs And at the moment, the culture doesn't really lend itself to that. You may have heard me speak this morning. I'm very much in line with John's thinking about trying to energise that entrepreneurial spirit, make those avenues of support more accessible for smaller businesses, not so overwhelming that a startup entrepreneur thinks this is too hard. I'll just go somewhere else. This is where we need to bring about a change in culture and in program delivery, in my view.
John's also really passionate about the social entrepreneurial movement and social enterprise. What's your stance on this emerging economy?
Yeah, look, the social enterprise is part of society. You know, it turns a place into a community, you know, some buildings into a neighbourhood. Has an important role. We had some fantastic presentations this morning where the hub, great concept, bringing people together, a supportive environment, even working closer to home, using that infrastructure and the team spirit that actually is amongst like-minded people just wanting to put back into their community. Social media really lends itself to that, but I think people are looking for that too. You know, it gives meaning and purpose to people's lives. I'd like people to be a commercial entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur and see that as just part of a rounded life. Most of the social entrepreneurs, and I spend a lot of time in not-for-profit organisations, they also have to be not for loss. That's how you make them sustainable. And some of that acumen that we've talked about in ideas, in entrepreneurship, in commercial know-how, in business smarts, that's as valuable in the social entrepreneurial space as it is in the commercial entrepreneurial space. I think we just need a renaissance in enterprise and entrepreneurship, and hold up as our heroes those that are engaged in new ideas, new ways of interacting, new ways of making, you know, a meaningful life for people, and social entrepreneurship's part of that. And I value those contributions and recognise a lot of businesses spin out of them as well, or are complemented by them.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to comment and share the responses of the Minister and the Shadow Minister below, and hashtag AskSmallBusiness. I'm Matthew Gordon, signing out for OurSay.